Mike, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you, Jeff. If you can hear me,
I can hear you as well. Is this Kimberly Berry?
it is. I am so sorry. I don't know what is going on.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we are now live. We've just gotten started, and I really want to apologize to anybody who's listening, who's maybe been waiting. We are much later than I'd ever hoped to start one of these, but we had some technical difficulties connecting to this new system and trying to lock it into Facebook Live. So hopefully this will give us an opportunity to record this and present it in the future for anybody who might miss it now or miss it because we're late starting. So once again, apologies for all of the technical difficulties. But we are getting this started here, a little town hall on unemployment insurance. This is very important at this time. And I really want to start by thanking the Deputy Director, Kimberly Berry, for joining us this evening. I also really want to thank my staff. My staff has been putting in a lot of hours as well, trying to help people with the unemployment system, help people navigate the system. But we all know that even though the unemployment's been working very, very hard, and folks have been trying to connect. That doesn't do any good for folks who have been unable to get connected and have been unable to get their unemployment turned on. So I don't know if anybody is on who is not muting their mic, but if you could please mute your mics. There's a lot of background noise right now, and thank you. So I'm going to be joined by the director of the department, Mr. Gray. I was disappointed he wasn't able to join us tonight, but I think we're really lucky to have the deputy director. I had an opportunity to have some interaction with the department during the last sort of auto determination robo fraud issue we had several years ago. And I really found that there was a lot of folks there at the department and on the outside who are really trying to help people get connected, who are really trying to solve problems for people. But the volume and magnitude of the issue here with COVID-19 has been absolutely unprecedented. So I want to start by asking Ms. Berry to give us a sort of broad description of where we stand. Maybe tell us about what's been going on over the last few weeks. Maybe give us an idea of what to expect going forward. Try to maybe cover some of the typical problems that people are having. Maybe give some of the folks who are listening some suggestions about how they can more successfully interact with UIA, and then we'll open it up for questions to the extent that we can give folks some answers. So if you wouldn't mind, thanks for joining us, Ms. Berry.
Thank you so much for having us. And again, I do apologize as well for the technical difficulties. One of the things I wanted to stress for people is right now we understand this is a pandemic and people have not received benefits. And so we are well aware of that. We're trying to do as much as we can to get that benefits in the hands of those people who need it or are eligible. One of the things we've been working on really diligently is making sure those people who have non-monetary issues or issues where their payment did not automatically go out the door, we have quintupled our customer service staff in that area and on phones. So between the phones and those areas, that's our main focus right now, is to try and get those who have not had a chance to file yet, an opportunity to file yet, to assist them in filing on the phones. We're also trying to make sure those who have already filed have not received the payment yet, receive their payments. We have a couple hundred staff dedicated to making sure we work on those non-monetary issues. And then we also have staff that are in the background kind of working with the lockouts. We have a lot of employees who have locked themselves out of their account. So we have a couple hundred staff working on those as well. So we're trying to make sure we hear the public, we understand where their needs are so that we can kind of assist them through those issues. If you haven't received your benefits yet and you haven't heard back from the agency on the status, but you've successfully submitted your claim, please know that there's no need to call us or message us. We will be in contact with you. We just want to let our staff focus on those issues so that they can reach out to the employer and the claimant to get their responses to some of those pending questions. All those pending cases are a priority right now. Again, we have a couple hundred staff dedicated to that to make sure we can get those issues handled a little bit more promptly than what we have been thus far. Just to date, to give you a couple of statistics on where we are, from March 15th to May 6th, May 8th, we've paid about maybe $4.1 billion out to over 1.7 million claimants. And so we are kind of reaching a lot of people, but there are still that small population that we are not reaching that we kind of want to focus our attention on right now. So again, if people have not filed claims or if they are still attempting to file a claim, please reserve the telephone lines and the online system for those people because the rest of the people who have already filed, we are looking at your information. So just give us a little time, a little bit or additional time, shall I say, to get those answered and processed. So I wanted to make sure people understood that we are still working around the clock. We are still staffing up to make sure we can meet the needs of the public and those who have not received benefits. This is a pandemic like none that we've seen before. So we are working to make sure we can get those claims processed.
Well, thank you. I know that you know, we've certainly been getting a lot of questions in the office, and we've gotten a lot of help from the agency on trying to, push folks through the system. Could you talk a little bit about what folks should expect if they are, if they filed and they're waiting? You had said a second ago that if they filed, that they should not keep calling, but should wait for you to contact them. What's an amount of time that someone should wait before they might get concerned and call again? Is there a certain number of weeks at which a resident ought to knock on that door again?
Right now, it's taking about approximately 3 weeks, or more, maybe four even. So for instance, we have a couple of claims that we're working on that we're almost in the beginning of April, and so it's about taking about 4 weeks, given the volume of what we've seen. A number of other claimants will soon receive benefits after the case has been what's called adjudicated, which means we've gotten information from the claimant that says, yes, I'm entitled to benefits, but there's something from the employer side that we need to get more additional information on. And so we could be missing paperwork, or probably the employer is disputing, or we need to review the documents that have been submitted. So in those instances, it is taking a little bit longer because of the sheer volume. And so again, we have dedicated an additional couple hundred staff to just focusing on solely that. And so our focus is to continue to staff up on that area to make sure we can get those issues resolved for those claimants.
Great. And for someone who may have one of those cases that needs to have some adjudication because of an existing issue with an employer, can you talk about the extent to which those concerns remain after the governor's recent executive order, or do those problems all go away? And could you just kind of describe the order in brief?
So the order has taken away a lot of things for the claimants. Absolutely. We did get a couple thousand, maybe like a little over 25,000 out, which is fine. But there's still work to do in the background to where with the executive order, we still have to reach out to that claimant and that employer to get additional information. So we still have a couple of thousand of those out there, maybe a good little over 25, 30,000 of those out there. So those still have to be looked at by a person. So the executive order was very helpful, but there's still a little work to do on our side as well.
Great. I think it's helpful for people to understand a little bit about what happens on the back end so they can understand why it does take so long. What do you do if an employer doesn't respond in a prompt way, a previous employer?
So we're trying to give the employers enough time to respond, because just as we're receiving a lot of information from the public, so are the employers from the agency. And so as we're sending that information out, we're trying to give them their 10 days, give them a couple extra days. It probably takes about 14 to 15 before we actually make it to that particular file. And then once we make it to that file, we look at what's submitted by the employer, what's submitted by the claimant. If we have an opportunity to reach out to the employer to call them instead, we'll make that call to the employer instead, because we know, some brick and mortars are still not back yet. And so we'll try and reach out to the employer to get an answer. So, but if by chance they have not responded, then we'll give a decision on the best available information, which is that from the claimant.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful for people to hear because people are justifiably frustrated. They've been waiting, and it's I think valuable for folks to hear sort of what the back end process looks like. How much time employers have to respond, because I think that plays into a little bit of why some of these more complicated cases are taking a little bit longer. And so let's next question is, let's say this is a question from the comments that we got. Let's say that you are approved for your benefits. You've been accepted. How long should someone expect to wait between that notification and the payment arriving in their account?
When they get their monetary determination, which tells them if they are approved, this is how much money they're going to make, there's also a certification date. And usually that's about 2 weeks from the time that they receive that letter. And so 2 weeks from there, so we're at 14 days, they'll call Marvin or go online and certify. And then from there, it takes approximately about a week for them to actually receive it in their account or on their debit card. So you're looking at about maybe 21 days before they actually receive their first payment.
All right. Now, I think that's very useful information for people, so thank you. And I think you may have said this already, but I don't think we can stress this point enough because I've spoken with a lot of folks. I know my staff has spoken with a lot of folks who are very concerned about their financial situation. And once again, you may have said this already, but if I end up out of work on, say, March 17th, but I'm unable to get certified until April 17th, when do my benefits start getting paid out? And am I going to see that lump sum in that first payment?
You should see a lump sum in that first payment, absolutely. And what it does is it backdates. So for instance, if you start working on March 15th, March 17th, and you now got your certification, it'll pay out for all of your certification, which will be there for you to pay out. And so we'll pay out on all of those, provided there were no additional wages that were earned or things of that nature that may hold the week up. But as long as you were unemployed for that full amount of time, then all the benefits all the weeks will show up. And then once they're certified, all the benefits will pay back out. Absolutely. Or for
I think that's important.
actually even get into the system until today. Once they get into the system, once that monetary determination is issued, if it goes back to March 15th, March 17th, then all those benefits as well.
Great, thank you. And so just getting back to this previous process you were talking about in terms of reaching back out to previous employers, there was a question that was put in the comments about what happens when an employer denies benefits, or if an employer says that that person left voluntarily. Does the applicant get notice of why they were denied, and is there an appeals process, and how does all that work?
So what happens is we issue what's called if by chance you get the monetary determination again, which tells you if you're approved, this is how much money you receive, when you receive it, how many weeks you're entitled to, things of that nature. And so then from there, the employer or the claimant, if they're not happy with that monetary determination, can protest it. And so if they protest it, they'll get a determination telling them whether or not. So if the employer says the person was fired, or person quit, and then they send in their information, we reach out to the claimant to send them what's called a 1713 or a fact-finding form to get additional information from that claimant. And then once that claimant turns in their information, we look at what the employer has, and then we issue a determination. If either party is not happy with that determination, they can file a protest to that as well. And then what will happen is we'll get additional information from the claimant, additional information from the employer, and issue what's called a redetermination. And so that means we're relooking at our decision based upon the new or additional information. And then if either side is not happy there, they can appeal that and go before an administrative law judge. So there are a couple of steps to take for either side if they're not happy. Typically it doesn't go that far, and during COVID, we haven't seen as many of an uptick as we thought we would. And so that's not necessarily the issue alone. It's just that we're waiting for stuff from the employer, or we're waiting for stuff from the claimant, but then a decision is ultimately made. But either side can go as high as an administrative law judge.
Thank you for laying that process out for us. And in terms of the impact on employers, I know that if this were happening, if we were talking about this 2 years ago, a lot of employers know that if their former employees claim unemployment, that ends up showing up in their UIA taxes, or their obligations to pay UIA insurance. Really is what it is, not taxes. And so my question is that for employers during this COVID-19 response, do their answers to these questions about their previous employees have any impact on their payments going forward? And how exactly is that bookended in terms of when their responsibilities start and stop to pay for folks who are on unemployment?
So as far as the employer is concerned, right now they're sitting in a good spot, because none of the benefits that's paid out to the claimants will be charged to the employer right now, currently under the executive order. And so what we look at is their last 18 months, if it's a regular UI claim, who was a little bit different because it's a self-attestation, and you also have employees who are, don't have an employer. So it might be a gig worker, it might be a 1099 person, it might be a person who's doing Uber, Lyft, or a fast food delivery or something like that. And so it might be a low wage worker. So those people don't necessarily have an employer. And so that's going to be paid by the feds and then charged to a non-benefit chargeable account. And so because of those factors, the employer is kind of not really charged at this moment. And so it really has no effect on them necessarily. What does have an effect on the claimant and their benefits is that separation and how it occurred, possibly, if it's not related to COVID. And so some of the cases we have been seeing, they're not COVID related necessarily, and the person was separated prior to COVID. And so those are the ones we have to actually look at thoroughly and get more information or additional information from either the claimant or the employer or both.
Yeah, thank you. And so one of the questions we got over the chat is, what's the method of communication from the UIA to individuals waiting for an update? Should they expect that update over email? Is it going to come over phone? Is there like only one way for people to get communication?
One of the things I would encourage them to do is to look on our website. We update often based upon the questions that we're getting from like these we're seeing on our Facebook page or our Twitter page or social media from our department. And so once we get those questions and start noticing a pattern of some of the questions that people are kind of trying to understand, we kind of start making frequently asked questions. We make helpful videos, we make tutorials so that we can answer those questions on our website. We're also trying to get into a cadence of sending out correspondence to the claimant because we don't want to overwhelm them either with too much information. But we want to make sure they know we have their claim, they have everything we need, just hang in there a little bit longer, and we are processing their claim. So we're trying to get a little bit better communication with them. But right now we're updating our, again, our FAQs, our helpful videos, our tutorials online. So kind of monitor that online website. And there are literally a lot of videos there that you can kind of answer some of the questions about non-monetary issues or additional claims, things of that nature to where they wouldn't know what that meant on the average, because some of them have never filed before. And so we make sure we try and keep that updated as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And so here's a very specific question. How can someone receive an access code to apply or apply without a state ID? Is that possible for someone to apply without a state ID or a driver's license?
They don't have any idea at all. I was still trying to apply. I'm not 100% sure if it'll let them go through. It may let them file the claim, then we have to reach out to them to ask them a question about their ID. So for instance, I have a claimant who reached out a couple of weeks ago who entered a wrong digit on his, transposed the numbers on his driver's license. And so I had someone reach out to that person and talk to them about that to figure out, what can we do to fix it? And that's the only thing it was. So if they have no idea at all, then still put in some information that they have, even if it was an older state ID or if it was an older driver's license. And that way we can at least use that to get the application filed. Then if it's a problem, then the staff will reach out to that person to see if we can get some additional information. And if they can possibly upload their social security card to the system, and so we can at least have that.
Okay, FYI, the questioner is saying that they can't apply without an access code.
Okay, the access code is something different. So if they've had an account before, is that what they're saying? They've had an account before and now they can't get in at all because they don't have a valid driver's license now?
That seems to be what it is. The question is, quote, how can someone receive an access code to apply, comma, or apply without a state ID since calling UIA doesn't work?
Okay, that's what I want to take back to the team because I'm not 100% sure how they would do that if they have no ID at all.
Yeah, well, we're having some technical difficulties here, so I'm not sure exactly who asked that question, but whoever asked it, please, fill out our form, on our website, on the Jeff Irwin for Senate website, or email our office or call our office and make sure we have your information so that we can knock on UIA's back door and say, we've got, an interesting case here and we want to be able to help this constituent. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
How about what does an ineligible week mean?
That means that for some odd reason, be it whatever they answer on that question, makes them ineligible for that particular week. So I've seen cases, because I've been looking at cases myself, so I've seen cases to where they may be eligible for the first 3 or 4 weeks, but then something they've done, be it they've waived that week. One of the main things that we see is a claimant waives the week by accident. How I don't know, but they choose that they don't want to waive for that week. Or they may add in too many wages, which makes them ineligible, or no payment will be issued. So it depends on how they answer that question that makes them ineligible for that week. That's one way. The other way is they could have a non-monetary issue that's open. If they have that open, then it may not pay out that week until that issue is resolved. So they've been receiving benefits all along and something makes them ineligible, they must have answered something incorrectly. If they've never received benefits and it's ineligible, then there may be a non-monetary issue that's open. So it could be a couple of different reasons why.
Okay. This question is, I cannot file a PUA because a past claim is still processing. How do I proceed?
But the PUA application is there. If the PUA application is there, they can file a past claim. And what it'll do is it'll close out the claim that's pending and it'll open up the PUA claim. So they have a past pending claim.
They're claiming that their past claim is still processing, so they're unable to open a PUA claim.
If they can see it, they can open it. Trust me.
Okay, yeah, I believe you.
If they can see it, they can open it.
All right. Here's another one that we got over email. I filed a PUA, but the monetary determination was only $160. How can I get maximum benefits?
So I'm going to say this really, really slow and loud for everybody that has not filed their PUA yet. If you're expecting to get more than the base minimum, please upload at the front end all of the information that you have as far as what taxes you filed, a Schedule C, any type of information that tells us how much you've made in the last year or two. Because what happens if you don't upload information at all, it's going to only give you the minimum. So now that person has to go back into the system, upload additional information that will qualify them for the maximum benefit amount, and then we have to open up an issue for us to adjudicate that piece. But that's typically what happens, is to get through it a lot faster. People are just filing it and not noticing that it's going to give them just a base, because we don't have any wages on those people. So because there are no wages in our system, we can't compare it to what they made last year. And so the only thing we have to go by is nothing, because they haven't given us anything. So now they have to upload information to allow us to give them the maximum benefit.
Right. So another way to say that maybe would be that they have to demonstrate their income as being sufficient to justify that higher benefit, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
And either way, though, whether they're approved for the minimum or the maximum of $364, is that they still get the $600 federal either way? Is that right?
Correct. Under UA or under the pandemic unemployment assistance. Correct.
All right. Here's a short one. What does processed pending payment mean?
So processed pending payment means that once they've so for instance, if something happened in the process today, it still has to go overnight. The banking has to do what it does, and it's going to take a couple days, probably up to 7 to 10 days, for it to actually make it into their account or on their debit card. So the process pending payment means it's literally processing through whatever the ACH is and the banking process is.
All right. All right, I'm getting into some here that I'm trying to read off my other screen that are a little more complicated. So let me just try to read these and see if they make sense. This person says, I used to have 2 part-time jobs, but was recently furloughed from one of them. I am eligible for $160 per week from PUA for that furloughed employment. I'm filing my first claim, and they are asking if I have worked or earned money in the last week. I've continued to work for my other job, but I did not work for the job I was furloughed from. Do I need to include all of my earnings, even though it's not related to the employment I am filing a claim from? If so, what happens if my earnings are more than 1.5 times my benefits?
So yes, you do include all of your benefits that you are, all of your money that you are. And if by chance it's more than what the 1.5 times the benefit is, then it's probably not going to pay you out anything. And typically that's around about approximately $543. So if it's over $543, it's not going to pay out anything. And if you don't get it on UI or PUA, then it will not give you the $600. That's a misconception. You have to be getting either regular unemployment or the PUA in order to get the extra $600. The $600 doesn't pay out by itself. Because a lot of people think that, and we get a lot of questions about that. Well, I was approved for benefits, but I make too much. So what about the $600? It doesn't pay out if you don't get unemployment or PUA.
Thank you for that clarity, and also for, giving the very specific thresholds. I always find that that's very useful. All right, so there's a question. There's actually a couple questions that are essentially about the status of the phone system. We've got another person saying, "Hey, I don't have a state ID. I need to be able to call in, but I can't get through." There's another person saying, "The phone system was down last week. Since I don't have access to computers, is this repaired yet?" Or can you give us sort of an update on sort of what the access looks like via the internet and via the phone? I know that the guidance that we've been giving out of our office is for people to use the internet as much as possible. But can you talk a little bit about sort of what guidance the department is offering in terms of how people can best connect via the phone, if that's really their only way?
If the phone is their only way, then I would suggest they try and call on Saturdays if they're trying to file their claim for the first time. One of the things we're trying to move people away from is if they do not have internet access, we want to make sure the phones remain open for those who do not have internet access. If people have already filed a claim or they're waiting for a status on their claim, there is nothing else they need to do. They gotta hold on for us, because I need those people in the background working those claims to get you an answer. And so for those who the only way they can reach us is by phone, I would say their best time to call is on Saturday. The phone system has not been down. Let me clarify that. Only the system went down, and the last time it went down was back in April. I want to say the 13th, I'm guessing, but I think it was around that week, was the very last time it went down. But our system has been sustained. I think what people misunderstand is that though on our side, it's only a few hundred of us, so there's only almost 1,000 of us that's working. We can't get all those calls through at one time because of the way our phone system allows calls to come in. And so it's literally filtering people through. The phone system is not down. It's just that high of a volume of people getting through. So I wanted to clarify.
It's actually, yeah, it's very staggering, the numbers I've seen. We've got, how many people have filed so far in the state of Michigan?
As of yesterday, 1.7 million.
1.7 million. And the last I heard, the department was churning through approving something like a couple 100,000 a week. Is that still about right?
Yeah, we are. We absolutely are.
Once again, there's no comfort for the folks who haven't been able to connect, but I do feel like that is somewhat helpful for folks to understand the magnitude of the need and the magnitude of the work that's being done each week to meet that need. And so how many claims have been approved so far out of that 1.7?
Out of that 1.7, I want to say at the last count I saw was 825,000, but I have to verify that number today, because literally I just got that new number today. So I'm going to verify that number. But yes, over there's quite a bit approved. And a lot of those were approved through the executive order that just came out. So we were able to get some of those through. So every day, I just need people to understand, every day we're looking at staffing. Every day we're looking at trying to figure out how to make sure what else can we do to deal with the system to get stuff through to make sure it hits people a little bit faster. How can we adjudicate a little bit faster? So every day we're looking at those staffing needs, and we're looking at different measures in which we could try and get stuff out the door a lot faster than what we have been so far. Because while those numbers are great, to your point, it does nothing for those who have not received anything yet. And we understand that. We're here and we get that. And we still have staff that's working 6 days a week, sometimes with 7 days a week. Staff are working 12, 13, 14 hours a day trying to get this stuff out so we can make sure everybody who's eligible gets the benefit.
Yeah, and I think it's also helpful to hear those numbers for the folks who are waiting to get some sort of sense of, what might be a reasonable expectation in terms of the department's ability to authorize their claim and start paying on it. I think folks really benefit from getting clear information about what to expect. And I think one of the things that's been so frustrating to people is just sort of not knowing what's happening inside the black box. So I really appreciate you doing this with us. Here's a somewhat selfish question from my office, which is there anything that we can be doing differently to work better with the department? We've been, knocking on the back door. A lot of folks there at UAA have been helping us. We've helped, hundreds of citizens in our area get connected. But is there any way that we can be more productive or more of an asset to the efforts of the department in getting more of these claims approved more quickly?
To be honest with you, I'll let Steve handle that piece. I'm not 100% sure what our ask would be, to be honest. Just beyond trying to help make sure you guys understand what we're going through and what we're trying, the challenges that we're facing to make sure we can get this done in a timely fashion. And I think for us, it's hard for us to when people feel like we're just like sitting here doing nothing, or not really aggressively trying to get this done. And what people don't understand is that we're human too, and so we have our family members that are out there, still not trying to get claims and stuff like that. So it's not like we're trying to slow down the system. We're trying to figure out as many ways as possible. I promise you, Steve and we're in the background with the team trying to figure out how to make stuff happen. So at this time, I can't think of anything, but I'm sure Steve probably will. And I'll make sure I'll talk to him about it so he can reach out to you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We just want to be a partner because, like I said, we're trying to help people through this as well. And we know that a lot of folks over at UIA are. My understanding is that pre-Corona apocalypse, you all were processing thousands of claims a week. Maybe a high watermark might be 10 or 15,000 a week would be like a really big number. And now you're looking at 300,000 a week for 9 weeks straight, or not quite that much, but 6 weeks straight.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think that's the piece that people miss too, is how the sheer volume that came in overnight. And it was nothing that we could have anticipated. It was nothing that we could have done differently. And so now we're just trying to make sure we stay ramped up, we stay engaged. These town halls are extremely helpful for us so that we can get information out to people. So we do appreciate this so that we can see some of the commonly pitfalls that people make sure that information gets out to the constituents as well. This is very helpful too.
We've got some more questions I'm going to try to get in here before we have to let you get back to your family. Thanks for your time. Okay, here's another one. If a person is working another gig type of employment, say they're delivering for DoorDash or something, or Uber, Uber's probably not a good example, DoorDash, while waiting on their UIA payment. So does that income that they're getting from that gig need to be included in the system? Do they need to update their information? What is the department guidance on that?
They're going to need to first report their earnings once they get into the system for that particular week. So for instance, if they just started working for DoorDash, then they could actually, once they start certifying, they need to report that particular week in which the payment happened. So they're not getting overpaid, if that makes sense. But once they report it there, they don't have to actually upload anything different. It's just a number at the end of the cert to ask them if they had any earnings this week, and so how much. That's all. They don't have to do anything different whatsoever. Now, if they're saying that their 160 or whatever their benefit amount is not enough, and then they can ask and say they need to have it, they can file a protest to get it reviewed. But I wouldn't do it necessarily if
here's what I think is straightforward.
Adding it into your cert. Yeah. So this is how much money.
Yeah, you got to declare the
best way to do it is just to add it into their cert. That way they'll know at the onset how much they've made for that week.
Thank you. Can folks collecting Social Security benefits qualify for PUA benefits?
I always say apply and then let us tell you, but you're going to have to report that because that is a question that's on the certification. It's if they receive Social Security or any kind of pension or something like that. So. But and at the agency, we don't discourage anyone from applying. We'll deal with an RN as to whether or not you qualify. So I would definitely apply.
All right. Here's another specific one. It says, quote, reversed payment because I had the wrong account info and I asked for the unemployment debit card. Will it be on the card once it's mailed to me? So if I were to rephrase this, it says basically they entered the wrong account information. There was a reverse payment on that. And now they've asked for a debit card from the department. That sound like it makes sense to you? And they're basically asking, is that money going to be on the debit card?
Yeah, it is. It will be. What has happened is, to that person's point, and sometimes we had this where it crosses. And so as the payment is reversed back to us, they're changing their banking account information. But for this person, they just switch it to a debit card, which is fine. So what will happen is all that money that's in your account will switch over to the debit card once you receive it. Absolutely.
And then it just gets loaded on the normal paying basis, going forward?
Yeah. So they'll drop the entire amount that the person has on their account and on that debit card. And then moving forward, it'll just stay on the debit card unless that person changes their payment method.
Great. Here's another one that I've seen come up several times as a question for folks. Will I get in trouble if I don't know exactly how much I made per week when certifying my claim? My employer only gives a biweekly paycheck that does not itemize how many hours I worked per week, so I have to estimate the weekly breakdown. Or should I ask my employer for a weekly breakdown?
So what we base your earnings on is what you've made for that your gross. So if you break them down and divide it by 2 weeks, then that's fine because that's the best available information that you have based upon how your employer pays. So no.
So just divide it in half and make that your weekly claim. Yeah, makes perfect sense to me.
Yep.
All right. Here's another one. Can UIA allow for new claims outside of the PUA? As some new claims are eligible for the PUC, but are not just PUA. For example, they were furloughed or laid off. And it appears that Midas only allows online for PUC claims to be filed. Did that make any sense? I'm trying to read from the screen.
The first part of the question seems as if they were asking if you don't get PUA or you don't get UIA, can they still get PUC? And the answer to that question is no. You have to be able to qualify for either regular UI or you have to qualify for PUA in order to get the PUC. That's not by UIA. That's not our guidelines. It's the federal guidelines. So if you don't get any money from either one of those programs, you cannot get the extra $600. That's a question we see a lot, actually, Senator.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to review, if I heard you correctly, to kind of summarize, if you're not eligible for the state benefit under UIA, PUA, you're not going to get the federal 600.
Correct.
It's that simple, right?
It's that simple. It's that you have to qualify for one or the other.
That's good because I've been telling that to a lot of people, and I'm glad to know that it's that simple. Can I apply for unemployment when I was freelancing as a tutor? I was making $400 a month.
Yeah.
Yep. So once again, sort of like your previous answer, apply, be honest about your income, and we'll service your claim.
Exactly. And for that person, if they're a freelancer, make sure if you're stating that you got paid $400 a month, you want to make sure you upload whatever you can so that you can get the maximum benefits allowed to you for that $400 a month. Because if not, you'll get the minimum 160 plus the 600. So rather than having to go back and fill out the additional information, give it to us up front at the beginning so we can make that best decision on all the information that we have.
Great. And to that earlier point, if you're trying to maximize your benefits, well, share all of your income information with us. Give us as much information as you have, because that's going to allow us to see that you had income that is lost. Otherwise, you'll get set at that minimum level.
Correct. Correct.
Great. Here's another one that came in. Is there a way to solve open monetary issues on our part? I think that means that, as a claimant, or as someone like our office who's trying to help a claimant, is there any way for us to solve an open monetary issue?
There's not. Unfortunately, it's on our side, and we have to talk to the employer to see what they're saying. We have to reach back out to that claimant based upon what the employer says. We have to make a decision based upon that best available information. So it's nothing that you guys can do to help us out with that. That's all within us. And so that's one of the areas to which I was saying that we upstaff in that area to make sure that we could try and get those as soon as possible. We're really working hard on that right now. We're doing overtime for that area as well to make sure that they're working on Saturdays and Sundays and before the shift starts and after the shift starts. So we're putting a lot of pressure on them to try and help us make it through this, because I think that's where the big bottleneck is right now, is between the lockouts and on the open non-monetary issues.
Yep,
so that's where it is.
All right. I like this one. Would the deputy director mind giving an explanation on tax liability at the end of the year if a person does not elect to have taxes taken out of their UIA payment? What should people expect in terms of their tax liability? I know it's variable based on all the details in their own taxes, but is there any sort of advice or explanation you can give as to how that's going to hit them?
I do not have a clear definition on that for them. The best suggestion I can give is to take something out. I don't recommend taking nothing out or leaving it to chance, only because I know at the end of the year you may owe something. How much you owe, I don't know, especially given the pandemic that we're in. I'm not 100% sure what that guideline is going to look like for next year. To be honest, I don't know that.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that for the watcher, listener, constituent is that these benefits are taxable, clearly. And unlike the stimulus check, which is not taxable, these benefits are taxable. This is income. So however much you're usually paying in income tax, you could apply that factor to the amount. And of course, if you're self-employed, you've got that concern as well. So, it sort of depends on your particular situation, but these benefits are definitely taxable and the stimulus is not.
And definitely be careful, because you got to remember, you're getting an extra $600 a week. So that's gonna really come back to be a lot at the end of the day. You know what I mean? I don't want them to feel like, if it's regular unemployment and you're just getting 362, that's one thing. But when you add in that extra $600, that's $962 every 2 weeks if you're getting the full maximum amount. And so that'll be a lot to have to pay back in taxes. So that's why I encourage people to try, if you can, just try your best to at least take something out, so that it may lessen the blow or take out what you're supposed to, so that hopefully you'll get, it won't be a hit to you. I do think about that because of the $600 extra.
Yeah, do you think it'd be fair to say that the folks who should be most concerned about that are the 1099s, the self-employeds, and the low-wage workers who were previously not eligible for unemployment benefits because they weren't paying into the system, and now they're seeing this income? That might actually put them in a higher bracket, or it might end up causing them to pay more taxes than they're usually used to. So
I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
Great. Okay, it looks like we've got at least one more here. I'm just going to read this one because it's a little long. So we employee essential. Okay, so this is coming from essential workers. We know some of our fellow employees are applying for UIA. I'm sorry, I'm having to interpret this. Okay, so it sounds like the question is, for folks who are currently essential workers, if they make a claim for unemployment, what happens to them? Are they eligible for benefits for unemployment or for underemployment if they decide to take reduced hours because of concerns about COVID-19 or for another reason?
It totally depends on why they're not working. So, for instance, we have people who are covered because they're quarantined, they're self-quarantined. We have people that are not working because they're taking care of a loved one. We have people that are not working because they're on work share, which is a great program that we have. So you may want to talk to your employer about work share. Right now, if they're not able to work their full amount, they can get underemployment. If the employer says you're essential, but I can only afford to pay you 20% of the time, then yes, they can file for underemployment. But be sure to make sure they pick what they're trying to apply for. Be it underemployment, be it unemployment, or the pandemic unemployment assistance. So be clear on which one you're trying to get, because you don't want to make it seem like you're trying to get, unemployment when it's really under. So kind of make sure you're mindful of that when you apply for the benefits. But certainly if your hours have been reduced, but you're still essential, then absolutely you can apply.
Great. And could you give us just a real kind of high-level description of the work-share program and kind of how that works and what the rules are broadly?
Okay, so the work share program is a program that benefits the employer from the standpoint of they're able to have a reduction in force if they need to, such as in a time such as this. And that person could maybe work for perhaps 80% of the time they will work, and a portion of the benefits will be paid by the employer. The other 20% would be multiplied by the max, more than likely, if that person would get the max, whatever their weekly benefit amount is. So for instance, if a person was going to get 262, you multiply that by the 20%, and then that's what the person would get. And then they'll also get the $600. And so that's one of the beauties of WorkShare right now, is because it's actually paying out the extra. And so right now what we're looking to do, and we're kind of wondering about and kind of ramping up for, is if once the state reopens, if employers could use that program. So maybe the employer doesn't want to open up their business 100%. Perhaps they want to only open it up, 80%. And so then as they bring their staff back, we can have anywhere between 10% and 60%. They can actually go on WorkShare to bring their workforce back until they're ready to get to 100%. And so it's really a great benefit to the employer right now. And it too are also federal funds. And so we've covered that in, with the last legislation, with the last UBL for us. But the federal government covered that as well now for our STC programs.
Great. No, I really appreciate that description, and you're right. It is a great benefit to employers, and hopefully more employers will be able to take advantage of that to support their businesses and their employees at the same time. It seems like it's good for both sides of the coin there. Is there a deadline for the work share program, or can employers step into that or step out of that at any time, or are there rules around that?
Nope. You know what? One of the things the governor did as well is that in her executive order, she did lift a lot of the restrictions that we had for it. So, for instance, an employee had to be an employer for a certain amount of quarters. Well, that's lifted. Or if an employee is brand new, they couldn't get added into the work share plan. That's been lifted. And so there was a lot of things we were doing to try and make sure employees can participate in that program. The only thing I will caution people though is for the claimant side. Once the employer enrolls in work share, everything is done by the employer. So the employer certifies for you. The employer enters the plan. The employer lets you know you're on the plan. You'll receive a letter as if you would on regular UI, just saying that the employer will file your claim for you and everything. The claim is filed by the employer. The certification is done by the employer. There's nothing that the claimant does but get paid. That's it. And so that's one of the beauty of the program as well, is that they can upload the file. Everything will already be there for the claimant, and it's literally painless. It's seamless for the claimant.
Great, thank you. There's just looks like I've just a few more questions. Do you mind taking these, even though it's already 7?
Nope, because I was late, so fine.
But I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and all of your expertise and the work you do over there, Deputy Director. So let me just try to get through these. What does, quote, additional claim required mean?
So that can mean a couple of different things. So that may mean that their actual benefit year begin and benefit year end is over, and so they may need to file an additional claim. It could also mean that there was something that was answered that might be incorrect that's holding up that claim, and so for instance, if a person puts in like 3 certifications straight that they've made $1,000 or whatever, and it's like, okay, we need to file an additional claim because you're not unemployed at that point, because you're over the 1.5 benefit rate. And so that might cause it to be an additional claim. And so there's a couple of different things that can have that pop up, but that's one of the videos that we're working on this week. So please check that maybe Thursday, and it should be up on the system for you to see, or it might be in a frequently asked questions. But we actually want to make sure a lot of people understand what the additional claims mean, what non-monetary issues mean, so that we have videos for it, we have fact sheets for it, so people can understand if it's an error on their end or something that we actually need to investigate. So we'll have that information out there. But that's what it means right now.
Great. Here's another sort of specific question about the claim and how to maximize it. So if someone earned less than $160 a week from the job they got laid off from, will uploading those W-2s that show that kind of earning hurt their chances at receiving the minimum of $160 a week via PUA?
No, it won't hurt it. But if they're receiving less than what they got if they're receiving less than that 160, then I don't know why you would upload it at that point. Because literally, if you don't upload it, you're going to get the 160.
Okay, so what you're saying is that actually it could reduce their benefit below the 160 if they were to upload information that showed that their income was less than 160 a week?
No, 160 is the lowest we go. We don't go below 160. The minimum is 160 and the maximum is 362.
Okay, so but it won't actually hurt their payout, but it just kind of wastes their time.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it. All right, I was just trying to square.
Get the 160. Yes, you're right.
No, thank you. So if an employer starts reoperating and an employee has COVID-19 related concerns in the workplace, does this fall, if they were to refuse to show up, does this count as them quitting, or is this a non-qualifying reason to continue receiving UIA payments? How is that going to be looked at by the agency?
So we're still in talks about that. Steve talks the policy piece of it. Because technically it's supposed to be handled as a regular claim would be handled if the person refused work, if it's an offer of suitable work. But what's suitable in the middle of COVID? You know what I mean? So we got to kind of try to get a definition around that, wrap our head about how we want to adjudicate those. Because if by chance I'm, for instance, a person that's literally in the front lines at the front counter to where people are coming in, and though the curve is dropping, I'm still a little concerned. And I'm truly concerned. We want to see how do we help those people, because it's not fair to be forced to go to a particular place if you, honest to goodness, don't feel like you're safe. And then it's incumbent upon the employer to provide what they can to make sure they have the protective gear, so to make sure they have the mask or gloves and things of that nature. And so it's still something that agency is kind of talking about. We're kind of, working around right now because we're not there yet. But we want to make sure we have an excellent answer for both the employee and the employer once we actually open back up the state. Absolutely. So we're still looking at that one. We don't have a definite answer on it yet, but it could, just know that it could be perceived as a voluntary something to go to work. It could be.
So the answer to that is it's still yet unresolved, and we should have an answer to that from the department sometime soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So here's another one that just came in that seems really simple to me. In the work share program, do all employees have to be reduced to the same percentage of hours?
Yes and no. So yes, from the standpoint, if you got 15 people in that one plan, they have to be reduced by the same hours. But you as the employer determine their plan. So for instance, if you, Senator, are on one team and you guys are reduced for 20%, and I'm on a different team and I'm reduced 40%, then you can have two concurrent plans running or more concurrent plans running at the same time. So it's all dependent upon how the employer arranges it. But yes, so as long as your unit is reduced by 20% and mine is reduced by 40%, you can run those plans. And then let's say Steve's is reduced by 50%, you can add an additional plan. So you can have as many plans as you need to in order to keep your business going and moving forward.
All right, and then this last one is kind of in the technical side of things, but we've heard that there's a new technical support tool for issues related to MyWAM logins. Is there any expectation of when that's going to sort of be sorted out? Because it seems like there was a chunk of the issues that were related to that specific problem.
So that has been worked out, and what we have now is when you go in to log into your account, if by chance you're locked out, it has a click here, and when you click here, it opens up a form. And that form comes straight to the agency for us to work to unlock that account.
Okay, so that's going to work.
Yep. Yep.
Great. Well, I think it's time to land the plane here, and so this is my honor, opportunity, obligation to thank you, Deputy Director Berry, for spending so much time with us this evening here on this webinar, Facebook Live. I appreciate that you've done an excellent job of answering so many of the questions that we got online, and some of the questions that we had from our office, from the folks that we've been trying to help. And I just want to thank you on behalf of the people of the 18th District for all the work that you and your team are doing to try to connect people. Hopefully, in a couple of weeks, we can, feel like we're really getting to the end of, what has been an unprecedented flood of unemployment claims. And so, I know that everybody at the agency agrees with me when I say that we're all eager to get everybody's needs addressed, and we know that not everyone's needs have been addressed. So folks are still working very, very hard on it. But I do want to express appreciation on behalf of my office for the hard work that we know people are putting in getting the claims out that have been put out. I want to give you a last word, but I also want to let people know that if you've got more questions or if you want us to try to help you with your claim, we do have a link on our website that really helps us do it most efficiently. If you go to my main website, which is senatedems.com/Irwin, IRWIN, and then /unemployment. So it's at senatedems.com/Irwin/unemployment. We have a little form there that helps us. Otherwise, just email us or call us, and we'll walk you through what information we need from you to try to get that to the department and try to make sure that all these claims are paid and that people get the support that they deserve. So thank you again, Deputy Director. Is there anything else you want to add?
I do. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that the agency has added capacity. We've expanded eligibility, we've increased benefits, we provided emergency relief through this crisis for people. We understand that while this is no comfort to those who have not received their payment yet, we are working around the clock to try and make sure you do get your payment. Staff are working 12 hours, 13, 14 hours a day to make sure that they're getting your claims processed and your calls answered. They're working up to 20 hours a day trying to make sure that we have the system is standing and we're stable and you can get in the system. I want to encourage people, if you have a way to get in online, please do so. And let's leave those phone lines open for your neighbors, for your family members, so that they can get through on the phones, because that's where I think we're having our biggest challenge at, is that those who do not have an opportunity to get through no other way but the phones are not able to get through. So we can kind of be mindful of that as Michiganders, and let's just try and work together and let those who can get through on the phone get through on the phone. Those who have an opportunity to file online, try and file online. If you have any other questions, just be patient. I know, again, that's no consolation to you, but we have, I promise you, dedicated a team to work on just those adjudication issues and just those non-mines that haven't been paid, or those open issues, and even those additional claims. So we have a team of over 200 dedicated to looking at that stuff. And so we're trying to get those claims out as fast as we can. So we're still here. We're still committed to getting this economy back up and running. We want to make sure that we're responding and being very responsive to the constituents. And we want to make sure we're being responsible and helping to get Michigan back where it needs to be at. So thank you so much for your patience that you've had this far. And we are really, really out here diligently working to make sure we can meet your needs. So thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Deputy Director. Appreciate you. And thanks for spending some time with us this evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.